Looking for a therapist was not something that I necessarily was doing at the time. My very first experience with therapy was a little bit scary because it was following a traumatic experience. So I think my therapist was recommended to me on behalf of the school I was attending at the time after being robbed at gunpoint.
Welcome back to another episode. My name is Kendrick. I will be your host today. If you haven't gone out to watch our previous podcast episode, be sure to go out and check that video out. A lot of gems in there, a lot of information that you can take and apply it immediately to your life. Today, as always, we got a packed show. I've got some guests with me, as always. Grant Jones, how are you doing today?
Oh man, blessed and highly favored. How y'all doing today, man? It's good to be back. It's been a minute.
Good to see you, my man. Vince Bracy, newlywed. How are you doing today?
Happy to be back, happy to be married, happily married, and continuously sharing content of the Jasmine Show Wedding Edition on your social medias, your YouTubes, and all that good stuff. Happy to be back, Kendrick. Thanks for having me, man.
Yes, if y'all haven't gone out, check that out. That's Hollywood Access, correct?
Oh yeah, Access Hollywood too. That's part
Access.
of the Jasmine Show's content as well. Subscribe, the Jasmine Show on YouTube. After you subscribe, Kendrick Coates on YouTube.
Be sure to go out and follow Vince Bracy along with Grant Jones. So today, I was thinking about the topic that we were going to be discussing today, and it was something that we've briefly hit on it in previous episodes, but there hasn't been an episode dedicated specifically to this topic that we're going to talk about today. And that is all about kind of what we're going to be hitting on is men going to therapy, why men don't go to therapy, but the specific topic that we're going to be talking about is our own experiences going to therapy. We in our society, far too often we have this idea that men can't share feelings or can't even have feelings, and if a man shares his feelings, then he's lesser of a man. And when we start talking about mental health, it's important for men to see other men vulnerable, but then also other men hearing our story and other men's stories about therapy. So to kick this episode off, I want to hear from Vince Bracy about your experience of what did it look like for when you actually went out and were searching for a therapist.
Crazy, man, crazy. Yeah, I definitely touched on this. I think a little bit in the very first episode that we did. Uh, Looking for a therapist was not something that I necessarily was doing at the time. My very first experience with therapy was a little bit scary because it was following a traumatic experience. So I think my therapist was recommended to me on behalf of the school I was attending at the time after being robbed at gunpoint. I definitely did mention this a little bit, but yeah, that was the precursor to me going to therapy. So being able to speak to someone after dealing with police, my parents, teachers, etc. It was helpful in that moment. I definitely remember crying my eyes out. Uh, but yeah, it was just something that uh, I don't recommend the traumatic experience, but I absolutely recommend being able to speak to someone, get your feelings out, run through scenarios, and just to be able to discuss what took place. Because I think that's what everybody needs. Everybody just needs to talk to somebody about something.
What was specifically, if you remember, did you go to a specific website, or and I think you may have said that you had the school that you were at recommended?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So in that case, they made the recommendation, and did you just was it a email? Was it a phone call? Did you show up at, the therapist's office? How did that? Because I think a lot of men, you know, and I'm just generally speaking here, we say, "Oh, well, I got a referral. Now what?" And so I want you to speak on that a little bit just to give our listeners and viewers some context.
Yes, can't wait till we get to talk about other therapeutic experiences because there's definitely some referrals in my history. But yeah, this one again, I was more voluntold, if anything. Again, it was a very serious case. It was a serious situation that took place, and I believe my RA and probably some administrators at the school set up the appointment for me. So there was nothing that had to be set up in beforehand. Again, this was the very first time I had ever attended therapy. Shortly after did have to go to therapy for another situation, but this one again, I was kind of thrust into it, so I didn't really know what to expect. I can definitely say that in reference to telling all my business or feeling judged or like I could be wrong in a certain situation, like maybe I did the wrong thing, were thoughts that came up. But for the most part, it was like, well, I don't know exactly what's going to be taking place. This person's asking me all these questions and asking me about my feelings and stuff like that, so I was only a little bit hesitant, but for the most part, again, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know, even how serious of a therapist. I don't now that I'm thinking about I don't think it was a psychologist. I think it was just a family counselor or something like that at the time. So but yeah, that was my first experience having to sit down, talk about my feelings, share, things that I've been through, my childhood, etc.
Man, that makes it easy, especially if you have the school that you were attending, if they set up everything, because that's scary. Just making phone calls, setting up appointments. Do you think your experience would have been different as far as you, if they just gave you the referral and you had to actually make the phone call? What do you think? Do you think you would have made the phone call, or would you been kind of put it off or procrastinated on it?
Yeah, no, that is a good question. I've never thought about that before. I've always been a procrastinator, so there's a chance that I might have let that slip by. Glad I didn't though. Glad I absolutely glad I didn't because I definitely need to talk to somebody at that time. But yeah, I never thought about that.
It's a question that I think when it comes to, especially if people are dealing with trauma and actually having to put in the legwork, I think some people, and again, generally speaking, it's like, all right, I've already made the first step, the scary step of contacting somebody or mentioning that I want to speak to a therapist, but then it's even scarier to actually make that cold call and say, hey, can I set up some time with you?
Right.
So that's helpful to know that the school that you were attending, they pretty much just set everything up for you and you just had to show up. So that's cool to hear.
Can
Um,
I drop a note real quick too? I just want to say that I feel like I don't know this for a fact. I've been out of college for like a decade now. But I feel like if you're attending a school, just a message out there to everybody. If you're attending a school, there's a strong chance that your school probably offers a counseling center or some type of free therapy or something like that. So just putting that out there for anybody that might need to talk to somebody.
Definitely helpful, especially this time of year. At least for my experience, I'm like, man, how am I going to manage all this? So that's a good point, Vince. Of there are many resources that schools do have that sometimes students aren't always aware of, and so it's connecting with other people and looking to see what your school or schools have to offer. Going over to Grant. Grant is new. He finally made that jump into therapy, and I want to hear what was that experience like.
Oh man, it's so funny, man. I've been doing therapy for about a month now, so it it's different because for me, I have a background in doing stand-up comedy, so every comedian thinks that's therapeutic, and so like literally when I talk to my therapist, like, tell me about yourself. I do comedy, and she's like, and then she writes down. I'm like, wait, what you writing down right there? So, it's I have no problem being a comedian. I have no problem opening up and telling how it is. I think what is different for me now is understanding my therapist isn't there to fix me. She's here to give me the tools to understand that, hey, you are the person. who is controlling your life. So you have to be the one to put in the work to really understand that it's not what you do that makes you who you are. You have to already know who you are. And so it's like peeling the onion. And literally, she's giving me the tools. So this whole time, I thought through therapy or through comedy, I should say, I was peeling that onion with my hands. But she was like, "Hey, bro, you might want to use this knife or you might want to use this peeler." So therapy is like that jackhammer, that gets you down and dirty. Get to the goods.
Right. What did you how did you go about finding your therapist? Was there a website? Were you referred?
Yes, I was definitely, referred to, the VB man right down there. He told me about BetterHelp.com, and, I absolutely fell in love with it. What happened was the very first time I signed up for it, my therapist wasn't available until, like, I think I signed up for a Monday and then it wasn't available till Friday, but they have these things called groupinars where it allows you to see a bunch of different aspects of life where you can just tap in and you can hear all the therapists talk about it. So they talk about boundaries, they talk about people pleasing, they talk about understanding your worth and understanding like shadow work. So many different things where you can tap in and feel like you're heard. And the pressure is off because everyone's like on a video chat, but no one can like speak or be heard. You can only type it in, so there's no pressure. Um, you get to hide behind the computer a little bit, and the therapist really does a good job of kind of showing you guys that hey, you're not the only one out there. There are other people right here, and if you feel the courage to share, you have that opportunity to.
Nice, and that's a good point. You know, you hits on so many different points there, but the main one is you said your therapist isn't there to fix everything about you. And I think a lot of times, and I'm referring to men because I'm in these spaces a lot. It's us men wait until our relationships are almost down the drain, or if we're hurting, or if something catastrophic in the relationship happens to where I'm gonna call this therapist to have this therapist fix whatever's going on in my relationship, not understanding that the therapist is there as a tool to help you build on some of the weaknesses or areas of improvement for that relationship. And so I'm encouraged to hear that from you, Grant, as far as, there's still that piece of work that one has to do when seeking out a therapist. I'm curious to know, what was your perception before going to your therapist and what was the perception after? Because I think, again, having the idea of potentially some viewers and listeners having this perception of my therapist is going to fix me versus, hey, this is actually work that I have to do. So what was your perception before and after?
Yeah, that's a good point. Before it was more so like okay, go to therapy. There's negative connotations, you guys know, in the Black community about like, oh man, if you go to therapy, like your parents are gonna look at you weird, or like your spouse or your girlfriend. I'm like, man, you little B, you weak, bro. Like what? You going to therapy? So going into it, I just know older generations in the Black community really don't go to therapy. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but from my experience and with my family and everything, so it was a little intimidating. Like, okay, here we go. I'm about to go, about to do it, about to do it. Here comes a credit card, typing in the numbers. And then, but once I got there, I'm a truth seeker. So, you know me, I'm a very spiritual person. I love to figure out why things work, how I work, self development, reading books, self help. So, it's the mindset going into it, I think is very important. If you want to change, you have to be the one to want to change. You can't just have somebody say, hey, you should go to therapy. Like, no, you have to want to change. So it's one of those things where now I'm just like, wow, like I'm not looking at it as like the therapist is using my information against me. It's more so like she's trying to help me discover who I am. And through the process, she's helping me think of different scenarios and making me question a lot of stuff and getting me to think outside the box of my own head. I think with meditation, we always try to focus on like getting outside your head. It's more so about just understanding, being present in that moment. So one of the things that the therapist is doing is she's helping me get out of my head by looking at it from a different perspective. So a lot of times I think when we're in relationships or we're in a manipulative relationship, we can't necessarily see the things that are going on, but the therapist can, and she's there to guide you out in and out. So
That's a powerful point right there, and it's funny because I was having this conversation I think a couple weeks ago, and you mentioned the point of your therapist assist or allows you or has you tap into different areas that you may not be aware of to start questioning, and that's the powerful piece of therapy. You start questioning things that you thought you knew but you actually don't know, or question perceptions of who you thought you were but you're actually not. And I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago about this, about how do you know the beliefs that you have are true if they've never been challenged? And that's something that it's sometimes difficult for people to look at, because we're so used, and I'm guilty of it too. We're so used to having this perception of what we think the world should be, or who we think we are, until, like Grant said, you start peeling back those onions and start questioning, well, why do I believe what I believe in? And is what I believe in true to what it is that I want in my life, or the what it is that the people around me believe in? And so therapy is so powerful in that way, that we just start questioning some of the maybe misconceptions or ideas, or these world perceptions and views that we may have. Going over to Vince, this is something, again, us guys, even me, when I was going to therapy, it was scary. So for you, Vince, what was the scariest thing to actually going to your first therapy session?
Well, again, the very first one was a surprise, was more of a surprise to me. So yeah, like I said, the scariest thing is mainly like not knowing what I'm going to say, not necessarily trusting the person I'm speaking to just because I just met you for the first time ever. So what are you about to do with this information? How am I, you know what I'm saying? Again, like Grant said, what you writing down? I think that's a huge part of what people are trying to figure out. um yeah, when it came to attending a therapy session for the first time, knowing it was a therapy session, I would say the scariest thing that I did not realize, and I let Grant know a little bit about this when I got a chance to speak to him, uh having to go through those feelings again, having to remember the reason why I'm here, why I'm upset, why I feel like there might be something wrong with me in the first place, that I need to discuss it with somebody. So yeah, I definitely feel the pain of having to recant and remember all these other little things that happen. And it's like, oh man, how did I feel about this? And questioning yourself also. I think that's a really big part of discovering yourself, is having to, again, peel back the onion layers and figure out, wait, who am I really? Did I make this decision? Is this am I a product of my environment? Did my parents groom me to be this way? It's a long journey to go through.
The part where you said, "What are you going to do with this information?" And I think, I could be wrong, but I think a lot of people have that idea. Is this information that I'm going to tell my therapist, is it going to
Yeah.
be used against me? And or is my therapist going to share it with other people within my community? So if I have a friend that's going to therapy and my therapist knows that that is my friend, is he or she going to share that information with my friend? So
Ooh.
it's almost this game of how much can I trust you and how much information can I provide to you. So there's that balance. What specific point in your therapy sessions did you know that you could actually trust the therapist that you had?
Funny enough, I think I only spoke to that person one time. So I've probably had anywhere from at least 4 to 5 different therapists in my therapy journey. And I'll stay with my most recent therapist, who's also from BetterHelp, which is why I recommended it. Um, I probably got to it was a few sessions. It was like, I can't tell if you're smirking. I don't know if this, virtual sessions too. So I don't know if this is just how you talk. Are you slurring your words because you're tired? Do you just have a southern drawl? Like, so many different questions and assumptions. And I will admit to being an overthinker. So and being from the Bronx, New York, it's hard to trust people, yo. What can I say? What can I say? So, just watching people's facial reactions and how they respond to things that you're saying. So it's a lot of things that kind of play games with your mind a little bit, especially as somebody who people watches a lot. But yeah, eventually you get to a place where you realize, I think as Grant mentioned, that they're not trying to hurt you, they're not even trying to fix you. They're just trying to get to a point where if you say something out loud that you are aware of what you're saying, you're comprehending yourself, and you're also aware or can be helped or coached into defining a clear path into finding a solution for yourself to get better.
You mentioned you kind of overanalyze, overthink, and looking at the therapist. Okay, is he or she smirking, or what are they doing? It's so funny you mentioned that because I remember the very first time I went to therapy, and in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to this shrink, and he's not going to beat me at my own game because I thought like I was solid with just human behavior and being able to read people,
Nice.
and and it was the first 2 sessions, it was cool. I was like, "Oh, this isn't too bad. He hasn't really beat me at my game." The 3rd session, man, I wanted to hit my therapist across the face. He found what triggered me, and I'm not saying that I was actually gonna hit, I'm just figuratively speaking if anybody wants to try to cancel me.
You would have hit your computer screen, man. Don't do it.
But I remember that 3rd session, and I didn't wanna go back because he hit on something that I would it was either hiding or I was unaware of. And so the common theme with Grant and you, Vince, is that the therapist is almost being a guide or a coach of allowing you or helping you see different aspects of yourself. And it's so funny in our society sometimes we pay for a personal trainer, we pay for lawyers, we pay for dentists, we pay for doctors,
Talk about it.
we pay for people to come and deliver our food. So all things, maintaining our health, making us feel good, but we don't pay for therapists or don't invest in therapists. And I'll just kind of get the both of your thoughts, Grant and Vince. Why do you think it's so hard for people to invest in a therapist?
Well, I would just say the very first thing that she told me, like during our very first sessions, she told me, "Hey, you might not be the same person going out of therapy that you came in." So, like, she's like, "Being an entertainer, you might figure out that, wow, I was kind of forced into becoming an entertainer because of my family. So she's like, there's a good chance you might not come out the same person. And she said a lot of times, and she said this just for me, but like in terms of just from a general standpoint, when you start peeling that onion and you start getting to that root, a lot of people, that's when they stop going to therapy because that's when the real work begins. And a lot of people can't deal with who they are. So there comes a crossroad where it's like, okay, at this point, we did the peeling, we did the work, and I feel like I'm a S person. Like I feel like I'm a bad person. So now you have a choice. Do you just continue to be that bad person, or are you willing to put in the work now? So I feel like people know people are very intuitive nowadays. Like they know what they have to do. It's cognitive dissonance. They know that smoking that cigarette is going to be bad for them, but they do it anyway. It's the fact that you wanna change and you wanna put in the work, and it's gonna be hard, so I feel like they know what to expect with the work, and a lot of people, unfortunately, just don't wanna work on themselves, so
That's the frustrating part, especially I'm sure the both of you have seen people that have so much potential. And if they were just to invest in whether it be just improving health, improving fitness, improving the mental health aspect. And I'm sure you both have seen that, but I've also seen it too, just some of the people that I work with, and it's like, man, y'all have so much potential. Take that extra step, not only for you, but all the people around you who care for you. And sometimes we get into this idea that, it's almost like that thing where we spend so much time pouring into other people's cup that we forget about ourselves. But it's like, okay, if we're spend time taking care of everybody else, who's taking care of us? And so taking that extra jump, taking that extra step to invest in therapy, man, it can literally change your life in a positive way. And so going over to Vince, why do you think it's so difficult for people, or maybe even maybe you thought about it as well? Why did it take you so long to invest in a therapist?
And just to piggyback off the conversation, obviously you can't help somebody that does not want to be helped. And that is in itself is a huge part of why therapy is important in itself. Most people don't realize that they need to speak to someone. And yeah, mental health in itself is super, super underrated. I think a lot of people are not aware of the fact that hey, like, I am a person, I am going to be communicating with other people. Everyone has different backgrounds, has been through different experiences, you know what I'm saying? So when all these things collide, it's kind of madness. And people take that for granted a lot of times. Again, as an entertainer, it's something I think about a lot. Just in general, as you mentioned, Kendrick, about human behavior, psychology in general, like you said it. Like, if we're going to personal trainers, we're going to dentists, we're going to people that took lots of time in school, as you're doing yourself right now, in school, degrees, studying for years and years to make sure that they are at the top of their field when it comes to this particular area of knowledge. Okay, I'm not gonna go get my teeth fixed at, what I'm saying, a podiatrist or something like that. You wanna make sure that you're going to somebody that has the knowledge to be able to help you. Uh, Therapy, a therapist, psychologist, I look at it as a personal trainer for your brain, pretty much. This is somebody that you go to consistently. You don't have to go every single week. It could be once a month, once every couple weeks, just to get a workout, a checkup. Same thing you do for the doctor when you go for your physical every whoever knows how long. It's the same thing. You have to make sure that everything is still working right, checking in on you, just like we do the mental health check-ins. How is everything going? Are you still the same person? Do you still feel the same way about these things? Uh, yeah, it's just super, super important. I don't understand why people don't want to do something to help themselves or better their life experience pretty much. But again, I think ego is a huge part of it as well because everybody doesn't not only do they not want to be helped, they might not even be aware that they need help.
Mm, they may not be aware that they need to be helped. That right there, I think, speaks volumes to where a lot of people are at with where they are at in life, and it's similar to when we, at least in my experiences, just mentioning something to somebody. Hey, why do you get mad when somebody asks you about this? Well, I don't get mad. So it's almost like a deflection and defensiveness to where for me, at least in my field and some of the work that I'm doing, is like, how do you get under that defensiveness while also allowing people to be themselves and comfortable in that therapeutic space. Now, sometimes there is, like Brant said, peeling back that onion, you get to that point where it's just like it's really uncomfortable and it's really sticky. And that's where, in my opinion, that's where the real growth starts happening. So if you can sit in that space, that stickiness, that yucky trauma that many of us have gone through, if you can sit in that and come out on the other side, it's like night and day. It's almost like a dark cloud has been lifted over you. Especially, I remember, my experiences of going through therapy, and I've had two different therapists, and they've been great, and each one has provided different aspects of a vision of myself of who I thought I was. But the thing is I sat with a lot of those emotions, and it has taken me years. Yes, I said years, not months, years to get to where I'm at now, but I'm still continually growing. So therapy is not one of those things to where you go for a week, you go for a month, you go for 3 months. I think this is a continual life journey of knowing who you are. Now, I understand that, for some people that might not be the route. I know before Grant went to therapy, he was more spiritual. So there's different ways that you can come to finding yourself or finding your better self. But at the end of the day, sometimes we need professionals to be able to pinpoint why we do what we do. And so moving into my next question, we'll go over to Grant. For you, Grant, you've had a different path to therapy. and you've recently, started going to therapy. What was your breaking point that you're just like, man, I really got to go to therapy?
Bro, I like to call it my quarterly life crisis, man. So one of the things I am aware of is, like you said earlier, Kendrick, we tend to overanalyze everything of our aspect. And one of my favorite people, I was reading a book. I think shout out to Vince. We were talking about the third door. And there was an interview with Quincy Jones, and he talks about how there's this thing called analysis paralysis, where it gets to the point where you think so much that you can't even move. You're scared to move. And so for me, I just turned 30. I'm in Team 30 right now. I just turned 30 on last Friday. So I felt like I had to have everything figured out at 30, you know? There's so much pressure. Like, I wasted my 20s or I didn't do everything or I'm behind in life. I gotta catch up. So, it literally got to the point where my relationship wasn't going well with a female. I'm 30 years old, and then I just left another job, and now I'm in between jobs trying to figure out everything. It got to the point where I was just like, "Bro, like, look at your stress level," and, like, it got to the point where my friends were like, "Bro, we've never seen you this stressed out before." They're like, "You stopped going to salsa, you stopped doing this, like, what's going on? Are you okay?" And then so, I'm usually a happy person, but I can't ever remember a time in my life where I was this stressed, and I'm like, "Clearly, this problem's not going away," and that's where sometimes you have to hit rock bottom, just to order for a wake-up call. And I always tell people like the story, like a parent can tell that child, "Hey, that stove's hot. Don't touch it. Trust me. When I was your age, I did it." But until that child touches that stove and goes, "Ooh, you were right. I should listen to you more." It's just like, bro, you got to touch that stove though. So, unfortunately, I got pretty close. You know, I don't think I hit rock bottom completely, but I warmed up my butt a little bit. So that was kind of like the breaking point where it's like, okay, clearly you can't. I think there's such a negative connotation with it. I watch a lot of Kevin Samuels, but he goes to the point where he's just like, clearly you don't know how to manage your life and you need help. Like you literally need help. Because if you're 30 and you're still having financial troubles or you're still having relationship issues or you have commitment issues, like everyone matures at a different age, but it's at some point where you got to break that pattern. So I was just like, hey, enough is enough. Let me get some professional help. Let me stop trying to do it. Because with therapy, I think it's like you said, it's an ongoing process. Going to work out, meditating, these are all tools to help you, but at the end of the day, it's just tools. If you don't get to that root issue, like we talked about in other sessions, it's just so hard to really say, I'm doing better, I'm doing better. Because if you just keep on going up and down, you're not getting to that root problem. So that's where it's just like, okay, let's figure out this commitment issues. Let's figure out this. Let's figure out that. So enough is enough. And I figured 30, try to do it before I'm 30, and like let's get it. Let's start off 30s brand new with help. So that's kind of my breaking point.
As
Sorry, I was talking so much.
No, it's I like it because you're providing context and detailed context because I think a lot of times many men need to hear that and needing to know, we sometimes don't know how to express what it is we're feeling, but if somebody else explains it to us, it's like, oh, okay. And so by you explaining that, Grant, it gives other people just a broader maybe perception or context around what we're talking about because sometimes all we need is somebody to explain it in a different way. I always think about it in school. For me, I needed things. I sometimes I need things explained in a different way, and it just doesn't connect until I start asking different questions, and then it's like, oh, I got it now. Or somebody else may ask a question similar to mine. I just didn't know how to say it, and so for you to speak those things is powerful, and I'm sure other people can resonate with you explaining, hitting that breaking point where it's just like, hey, 30 years old. And so often in our society, it's like, hey, you're 30 years old, you should be living the American dream. And that in itself is sometimes depressing for some people because it's like, well, what if that's not the life that I want to live, but I'm being forced into that life because, well, maybe my parents forced me down a career path that I didn't want to go, or maybe my partner's forcing me down, or maybe I have kids now and I've got to do X, Y, and Z, and it's difficult for me. So going over to Vince, at what point or where did you find yourself? making that decision or making that choice to go to therapy?
Uh, yeah, real quick, when I actually decided to go to therapy, again, I've been to a few different people, but the second time that I had ever gone to therapy, it was also kind of voluntold. My parents were going through a divorce. So that was probably one of the longest stints in therapy that I've had. And to my knowledge, it's the only black man that I had as a therapist. So that was an enjoyable experience for me, just for that, because I felt close, I felt home, if you will. But shortly after that, similar to Grant, I was in between jobs. I think I had just gotten out of a relationship. And I knew for a fact that my school that I was at offered free therapy. So I went in, and I was like a college ambassador at my school. So the therapist was immediately like, Vince, what are you doing here? Like, what's going on? And I'm just like, well, I need some counseling. Well, what is happening? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? No, I just felt like things were getting kind of stagnant in my life. And I know that I'm in between jobs. I'm not doing well in school and I just got out of a relationship. Nothing is weighing on my soul particularly right now, but I know to get my mind straight that that's something I want to make sure that I take care of. So just to jump back into what you guys were mentioning before, I love the show Couples Therapy. That's my jam. I was watching with my wife. I get to say that now too. I was watching with my wife. I think this was just last night, honestly, and there was a scene where a gentleman was having a hard time saying to his woman that he had his feelings hurt about something. And my wife goes, "Oh, why? See, that's the problem with y'all, man. Y'all don't know how to communicate." But part of the psychology that we're ingrained with in being a man is to be tough, to not show your feelings, to, you know what I'm saying, to be a provider, be all these things. And it's so crazy to me still, as smart and as genius and beautiful and amazing as as women are, they still don't
Good
see
job, good
that,
job.
right? They still don't see they still don't see that we, like, just the same way, and not to say that every woman is trained to be a wife, but I feel like there is a certain type of glorification of, the house with the white picket fence and the husband and the dog and the kids and stuff like that. But men are trained to work and not show feelings, I feel like, you know? And again, this is not necessarily true for everybody, but a lot of going to therapy for the first time is unlearning your defense mechanisms, unlearning, putting the walls down, saying things that you never said out loud before or felt some type of way like, oh, I don't know if I should even go there. Uh, so yeah, I really thought it was cool that you had mentioned that as well, because I don't know. I just feel like men in general, we are not prepared for it's almost a mental attack in a way, because we put up so many walls to not let people into that specific place of our minds. So yeah, that's where I'm at on that. You had also mentioned about being given ideas, being fed ideas, pretty much. A lot of times, my therapist will say, "Well, maybe you're feeling this, or have you thought about doing this or taking this approach?" And again, because we're not like trained to self-analyze as often, it's like, yo, yeah, I haven't thought about that. Maybe that is a good idea. Maybe I should approach this way, or maybe I should take a step back and look at it from this person's point of view, or maybe I should try something different, or push myself a little bit more, or hold myself back from doing certain things. And those ideas, not to say that men are stupid, or or people in general. We just need to be fed different ideas, again, because this is a person that has studied the patterns of thought, human behavior, modern psychology. And even though they've read books and books and done so many case studies, something might come up where it's like, I know exactly what this is. Doctors probably do the same thing. You know what? This looks like laryngitis. Maybe you should try this. Maybe you should consider doing this. And I think that's, again, something that people either are afraid of or aren't as accepting when it comes to therapy that they should be.
You know what's funny about that is when you say sometimes men need to be fed different ideas. I'm thinking back on, say, maybe high school or college when we're involved with a girl or dating a girl, and we're with our boys and we're like, man, forget her, like she's no good, da da da. And your boys are like, bro, for what? She's beautiful. She does this. She's like, no, she doesn't do. And then somebody says, bro, she's done X, Y, and Z for you. She cares about you, and you know us. We're like, oh well. Maybe. We're all salty about it. And so, yet being fed different ideas or different perspectives because sometimes us men, we just jump to an idea and just so stubborn with things and just hold on to that idea. But then sometimes we just need to, somebody to pump the brakes for us and think about it in a different way. Going over to Grant, from your perspective, Grant, what has been your biggest aha moment? It could be from something that you used to believe or an idea that you thought about yourself.
For sure. There's so many, and that's the beauty of life, the duality of not knowing and then learning and unlearning and then relearning again. Like I live for those aha moments. So when I looked at it from going into therapy with that mindset, it made the world of difference. For me, it's like when I do homework. So as a kid, my assignment last week was you have to understand who am I. That was the assignment. So it's just like okay. And then I remember I asked her, I was like, I hear a lot that a lot of people when people ask who are you, they go immediately into what you do. So but instead of going to that, it's more so about no, 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 it's not what you do. It's more is about who you are, like the essence. You might be an entertainer, but that's not who you are. So having those homework assignments of understanding, ooh, she's challenging me. She's making me think about who I really am and she's making me sit with that. And then it's just like, I get it now. That's where it's so important to be present in the moment because as human beings, we're not human doings, we're human beings. So it's about being in the moment. It's about being the light that you are and shining and everything. So we get so wrapped up in, oh, I got to do this work, or I got to do this. I'm an accountant. I got to get these numbers figured out. I got to crunch, work, 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 work. But like you said, it's just like I think Vince, you said it like it's like it's like a trainer for your brain or your mind, like the therapy. And so with that being said, you got to make sure that anything that you want to grow, you have to give energy to. So if you're putting your energy into work, but you're not taking care of your mind, then your mind's gonna suffer. So those aha moments are really coming from the homework that I'm getting, the assignments, and really challenging. Even like certain things like when you're in a relationship, codependency is like, maybe she doesn't want me to work so much because if I work so much, then I'll be financially stable, and then I won't need her anymore. It's just different things like that. Just using that as an example, you start figuring it out, and then your therapy's like, so then literally the aha moments with the therapist. She's like, now you're getting it, and then I'm going to give you another assignment. So it's literally like, okay, we're unpeeling, and I think once again, it has to be that mindset of like you have to want to change, and that's where people I feel like they want to, but they don't want it bad enough, and that's I'm going back to the hardest working man in showbiz, Vince Gracie, right there. He wants it, like he wants that. We always talk about this Diddy mentality, like that Savage video where he's like, "What can I do? What's next? Come on, I can do anything." So it has to come from within. There has to be a fire within you to want to change, and when you do that, it's going to like light this fire within you and it's going to allow you to have more of those aha moments. So that's where I'm looking for therapy. And I'm not going to lie, there's going to be some days where I'm be like, dang, she really triggered me. But it's when it's in those moments where you get growth. That's the duality of life where without pain you can't grow. So you need that pain to grow. So
Is there anything specifically that you've already started noticing from just the handful of sessions that you've had to where you're like, oh, I saw myself before addressing this issue like I did 2 months ago, but now it's a little bit different. So are there things that you can already see within your own behaviors to that are changing in a more positive way from therapy?
absolutely. I think Vince will attest to this too. Being an entertainer, part of our job is people pleasing. So literally, one way to avoid is setting boundaries. So I think my therapist did a really good job of explaining through a group that I watched. When you set a boundary, there has to be a consequence if that person oversteps that boundary. And you have to be not man enough because females go to therapy too, but you have to be in a firm position and stand your ground. So if it's like, hey, I'm talking to you right now and then I'm trying to work. If you keep on talking to me, I'm going to go to another place to continue work. So literally that happened to me with my relationship the other day. I was just like, okay, I'm trying to work and you keep on interrupting me. If you don't respect this, I'm going to leave. And so I just went to the coffee shop, you know. I literally was like, you have to give him something because it's like those two parents that say, Johnny, you really should clean your room. He goes, F off. And like, don't talk to your brother like that. He's like, what are you gonna do about it? Like, if you can't back it up, if there's no consequence, people can't take you seriously. So when you set boundaries, you have to stay firm and you have to give the consequence that comes with that boundary for overstepping it. So
Man, that's Johnny.
Johnny, Tyler,
Tyler.
clean your
Tyler,
room,
Johnny.
piss off, mom. You know, like,
But but there's you have to make people pay for not respecting your boundaries. And sometimes for people that may be conflict avoidant, thinking of, well, how do I make somebody pay for crossing my boundary? It's simple. It's simple. You know, it can be like you said, Grant, you just left and went to the coffee shop. Okay, you're not going to get any of my time if you're disrespecting my boundary. Other things, how that can look is if somebody is just showing up at your house, and I think we may have talked about this before, or maybe Dr. E did, I can't remember, but if somebody is just showing up at your house without actually calling you beforehand, stop answering the door. Address them, let them know like, hey, this is disrespectful. And I think a lot of times when us men think about addressing issues, we think about it as how aggressive can we get for people to listen to us. So if you're out with your partner and somebody's pushing up on your partner or disrespecting your partner, there may be a little aggression. And I was listening to a podcast and the doctor said happy aggression, to let that person know like that's disrespectful. You're in my partner's space. So for people that are conflict avoidant, I think that is one of the first hurdles to get over when setting those boundaries and making people pay for those boundaries because it's scary. I was there one time where I think there's a book it calls it nice guy syndrome, and I was afraid to let people know that they disrespected my boundary. Now, if I don't like something, I'll say I don't like that, or that's disrespectful, or don't address me like that. And
yep,
and it's crazy, people start respecting you more once
yep.
you address those boundaries that they cross. So it's being authentic with who you are as a person and how you treat those boundaries. And one of the ladies, before we go over to Vince, I think I may have mentioned it before. One of the ladies that I work with, she always would tell me, you got to teach people how to treat you. Because if you don't teach people how to treat you, they're going to treat you how they think they should treat you, and that's powerful of understanding how to take control of your boundaries in a healthy way.
I just want to say this real quick. We did talk about boundary setting, and it was the funniest thing because you were talking about Steve Urkel syndrome, where the Winslows did not lock their door, and that literally is setting boundaries, letting Steve know that hey, he can come in. And I remember Vince was saying, "Man, my family would have whooped Steve Urkel's ass, and I bet Steve would not come over again if someone would whoop his ass." So, with that being said, I just want to say this real quick, Kendrick. My therapist literally said if you are mad when you set boundaries, that means you're not in your like firm foundation. You're not like respecting your own self. When the other person is getting mad with your boundaries, that means it's working. So when I that was another aha moment that I had for you.
No, that's a good point though. If you're mad setting those boundaries, that's telling you something. But going back to so I want to ask this question to Grant, and then I'll come over to Vince, and I want you to think about this. When so some of the behaviors that you now have learned now going to therapy, has there been one specific thing, it could be a self-limiting belief or a negative perception of what you had of yourself, has that shifted, and if so, what was it? So I want you to think about that. I'm gonna go over to Vince. Vince, what's been one of your aha moments or successes from taking the time to invest in their therapy?
Yeah, the biggest success or aha moment that I've had, I've mentioned on here before, is speaking to someone that is willing to consider the possibility that I could possibly have ADHD. And these are things that I've, pondered over for quite some time, pretty much the majority of my life, but didn't do the research or didn't look too into it or didn't think too much of it. But having a therapist say, we're gonna submit you for a screening there, and speaking to a doctor who confirmed everything and then continued to provide information between my doctor and my therapist, giving me little notes and tidbits, and this is how ADHD people perform under this circumstances, or this is how people succeed in school. So just taking the time to have a big chunk of who I am and how I operate, unknowingly revealed to me, and be able to continuously pick up books and learn about it is something that is super, super helpful for me specifically, because I am my entire I'm 34, 30, turning 34 next week. Wow, we getting old, yo. Uh I've learned so many things about myself, how I operate, how I've operated in the past, and even certain decisions that I've made that I felt that I might not have been in control in. It's like, oh, my brain chemistry is wired this way. And this is how a combination of my brain chemistry as well as my personality and my upbringing, therapy, mental health, this is what it's all of. All these combined created this decision, this life path, these choices, and those are things that you can't regret. You have to live with, but it helps you lay out pretty much a clearer path going forward. So that's something that's really, really enjoyable to me. Still learning about myself. The other biggest, not really an aha moment, again, I really feel like I think Kendrick, you mentioned it too. Therapy is it's kind of an opportunity to learn the best version of yourself, to learn where you came from, to learn how to continue to strive towards being the individual that you think you are, that you want to be. And for me, discipline is something that comes up a lot in therapy, and self-discipline, y'all. So there's so many things I'm like, oh, teach me how to do this, or can we identify this, or how do I understand? And most of the time it's just me repeating things to myself, or me saying something out loud and the therapist being like, well, so why don't you do it then? And that's when it gets to, all right, Vince, all right, you're a grown-ass man, get it together. So
I
you
want
gotta
to
do
go
it.
back. I want to go back to that part where you mentioned, being diagnosed with ADHD,
Mm,
and I think this is so important for people to know that you can still be a high performer. You can still be
yes,
extremely successful. We have to get out of this idea that we are what we are diagnosed. So
right.
I think a lot of times people will say, "Well, I have, I don't know, diabetes, or I have whatever the illness may be," and that becomes, sometimes, and generally speaking, sometimes it becomes that person's identity. Your diagnosis is not your identity. So again, in events, you've done some amazing things in your career, and with, even although being diagnosed with ADHD, but that has not been your identity, and you haven't allowed it to stop you. You've had to figure out different ways to adapt to that, this new thing in your life that sometimes makes could, and I don't want to speak for you. I want you to go ahead and speak on that. I'm sitting here speaking for you. What?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. I definitely think that yeah, there was some adaptation that had to take place. Again, I wasn't diagnosed until about a year and a half ago, so went through most of my life just assuming I was either dumb or slow or couldn't operate in certain things. But when I did, start to come into myself and understand more about my own personal behavior. A lot of deep diving and self awareness journeys, pre deep diving into therapy. Also, again, I've just managed to turn my life into exactly what I want it to be. Again, it's a a self awareness journey that I've been on for quite some time, and I know what I like. I know who I am for the most part. I know what I want, what my goals are. It's just about building everything, including from the inside out, from your mind uh, to the rest of your life. Because what's this is it's a famous saying, something along the lines of, "Come on, Vince, it's coming to me. Life is not about life is 90% about how you react to things. That's what it is. Life is 90% about how you react to things, and only 10% about what actually happens to you. So you go into therapy being, frustrated or upset about certain things because something happened to you. But once you realize that, hey, we're here to discuss what happened, but also how you're reacting to it and how you're going to continue to react to prevent you from feeling a certain type of way here on out. That's to me, that's what therapy is about. And if there's not a better selling point than that, then I don't know what to tell you.
That's powerful right there. Powerful. And same thing that I asked Grant before we go over to him. So throughout your journey of going through therapy, has there been something that you, maybe it could have been a self-limiting belief or a false uh, uh, identity or false perception on who you thought you were? Have you learned about yourself in that regard? And if you have, what was it? So we're gonna go over to Grant and then I'll come back to you. So, Grant, coming back to you on the question that I mentioned, through therapy, did you find out what a self-limiting belief was, or a negative perception that you had about yourself from going to therapy? And if so, what was that? If you don't mind
Yeah,
sharing.
very good question. I think one of the biggest things I'm learning through therapy is like my therapist literally said, "Hey, like you do know, like, you don't nothing has to be wrong with you to go to therapy, you know what I mean? Like, therapy is just like life in general. Like, people go through so many things, whether it could be a car accident, it could be you losing your job, like, you need to discuss these things with somebody, you need to talk about it. Now, the severity of it is, like, obviously, if you, like, lost a child or something or lost a parent or, lost something very significant, yes, there's a grieving stage where you might need to talk to someone about it. But I literally talked to a friend on my 30th birthday, and he was telling me in LA, he was just like, bro, like, I'm putting in the work now. That way I can be like really, really good, better off from like years from now, put in that work. I always say this, if you live in America, you need therapy, man. Like it's they literally use a religion to justify slavery. You know what I mean? And people are still following that religion. Nothing wrong with it, but they're still following that religion that enslaved their people. So literally it's life. I think about it in the long term run. Life is literally unlearning everything you thought was right and really understanding life as a truth, not a fact. So you have to figure out your own journey. You have to figure out your own what's right in your own morals. What do you like? What do you don't like? What do you stand for? What won't you stand for? And so I think life is very subjective. There's no one person that can tell you how to run your life. And that's where everyone goes to therapy might thinking, okay, fix me. It's like you're in control of your life, bro. Like you need to figure out for yourself. I'm here to give you the tools. I'm here to question you. I'm here to get you to think differently, to spark that idea. That way you can come up with something. So that's the biggest thing for me. Like life should be seen as very subjective and we should get rid of the status quo of, oh, I have to have a wife and kid, I gotta have a nice house, a nice car. All these things should be met by your terms in your life. So that was really big for me.
That's powerful, man. And I want to take the time to appreciate you for, I mean, when you sent the group text, you're like, "Hey, just set up therapy." I was like, man, I was like, "Thank you." Like the universe has set its or made way for Grant to make that decision. And I think I was so excited because there are just things that I've experienced through therapy that I will like other people to experience. And it may be a little bit of a projection, but it's just like there's so much this feeling of happiness and being grounded of who you are as a person. You move differently in this life. And so I want to take the time to say that I appreciate you for taking that step and you know Ta I mean, basically facing your fears head on because it is not easy, especially being a male in or a black male in this country. It's not easy to go into therapy because that negative connotation of, oh, you must be weak. I think you may have mentioned it earlier. So kudos to you. Kudos to you sharing, your story and your path because I think a lot of people can benefit because you haven't had a linear direction as far as your therapy and your healing, which is great because it comes in different shapes and sizes. And so again, I appreciate you for taking that leap. Going over to Vince, same question that I asked Grant. Through your journey of going through therapy, has there been something that you've learned, whether it be a self-limiting belief or a negative perception that you had of yourself that you've learned and grown from going through therapy?
I just want to say I'm also very proud of Grant for going to therapy too. I'm really excited that he's started that journey. You see what happens when you go to therapy, you start coming out saying stuff like life is a truth, not a fact. Like that. I was like, "Ooh, okay, sir."
Yeah, I was
Uh
over there preaching.
some bars out here. Uh yeah, stuff that I've necessarily had to overcome or change, like paradigm shift about myself specifically. I I don't know. I've always been a very, very positive person. So even the fact that I talk about having ADHD now, like people that don't know me personally are like, nah, nah, man, you should uplift yourself. And I'm like, nah, I'm not like I've known I've always been like this. So it's not necessarily like I'm sulking or I'm upset about this. It's more of a celebratory thing because it's like I've known this for a long I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I've known this for a very long time and it's been confirmed. So that's always a great feeling for me. I would say certain coping methods, like again, we talked about boundaries and how I have very little. Still something I'm working through to this day. Uh, just the way that I go about uh, dealing with people, confrontation, all things that I'm not great at. But again, you're learning to be the best version of yourself possible. So as we talked about, seeking out professional help. When a pilot starts up a plane or a doctor is doing something, they have a checklist. Hey, this is this. Same thing for when you're going to therapy. They can provide a checklist of remedies, like I said, to be able to get you closer to the goal that you're looking for. If you have a bad cough or something like that, you got to check the Robitussin. We told us got to gargle with what warm salt and water earlier. Like there's a list of things, but you're not going to think of those things offhand. Like somebody that has been trained to say this is the official list. This is how we deal with these problems. One of these things is going to have a positive effect on you. So if you don't take the time to, utilize that resource, then again, I'm not sure what's going on with people. But like I said, for me, I've always been very, very positive, very self-aware, but even certain elements of my growth are things that I'm like, oh, all right. Like I said about discipline, I know I have to stay on top of these things. There's ways that I can. There's systems that I can put in place to prevent myself from procrastinating as much. There's things I can do. Everybody tells me sticky notes and stuff, but a lot of in the ADHD blogs, they're like, yeah, that stuff doesn't necessarily work for people like us. But yeah, there's a long list of things that, if you feel like there's an issue, if you feel like there's something either wrong or you're confused about something, somebody will be able to help. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, Vince, what I want to say, I want to play devil's advocate real quick. Who's to tell you that you're smart or not? You know what I mean? Like you live in like a corrupted system already. So for them to say like, "Oh, you're not smart because you don't fit this standards." No, you could be your own genius in your own regard. Just because they don't agree with you doesn't mean that you like think about it. We were kings and queens in Africa, bro. and then they took that away from us, and now we're here in their land on their terms. But it's more so like, no, like I'm a genius, and you have to accept that. So it's not about fitting in; it's about fitting out. So just once again, be careful how you talk to yourself, King, because you could be the smartest one in the whole fucking world, and you don't even know. Excuse my language, but I'm just
Always.
riled
I
up.
know I'm a genius. I try to play
So
humble though.
just don't play. Just to step in that ego. I mean, ego can be good in some regards as well too, because it gives you that confidence that you need. Like I remember 19 Keys, he was saying, I don't think we have big enough egos because there it's a capacity thing where they're trying to limit us of who we truly are. So that's what I'm saying too. Don't ever feel like you have to say that you have ADHD in terms of like, because I'm not smart enough. No, ADHD, and I think Dr. E always says it too. ADHD is his superpower, so embrace it. There's reasons why
All the
bipolar
time.
people usually have like a special ability. A lot of artists out there have bipolar. A lot of people are depressed. That's where the greatness comes. It's where the pain comes. Through pain, it's growth, and that becomes greatness. So
It's
definitely
great.
embrace that. Sorry, I had to preach that.
Yeah, definitely embracing that. Yeah, I enjoyed all that you said there. And yeah, I feel like we're kings. We're doing our thing out here, man. We killing the game. We killing the game. And yeah,
Yes,
I don't
sir.
use the again, I don't use the ADHD as like a oh woe is me. It's more of like I said, it's almost a badge of honor. I don't know if I look at it as that, but it's more of preparing people for hey, look, I'm gonna say some sentences. Most of them are not gonna be complete, and I'm left-handed. I'm going to do things probably way different than you've ever seen, but I promise they will turn
Team
out okay.
Lefty.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just a little preface. It's just a little preface. That's all. But everybody still doesn't understand, which is why we need therapy, yo.
Yes, sir. 100%. That is wow. There was a lot in that episode, and it's so powerful for three men up here. Shout out to Dr. E. He wasn't able to make it to this episode, but three men up here talking about our experiences, our lived experiences of going to therapy and some of the things that we had to deal with. I think these are the conversations that we need to have, because a lot of times from what I see, sometimes it's you need to go to therapy, and sometimes it's like how how do we go to therapy? What do we do when we go to therapy? What do we do when we get referrals? So some of those are some of the things that we tapped into in this episode. So before we wrap everything up, Grant, any final thoughts? Anything on your mind? Any current work that you're going to be doing or currently doing that you want to share?
I am working more on content, more virtual game shows coming your guys' way. We got some new games coming out. Check out my website at grantjonesentertainment.com. I'm gonna update it a little bit, and yeah, 2023, get ready. It's about to be about to be it.
How can people follow you, Grant?
Yes, Instagram, GJ Entertainer. Facebook, you can follow me at Grant Jones. And then once again, the website has everything you need to know about the ultimate entertainer, grantjonesentertainment.com. Shout out to your boy.
I appreciate you, Grant. Thank you. Vince, any final thoughts? Any final comments? And speak on if you have any current work that you like to share that's going on.
You can follow me at vincebracy.com. All my socials and everything is on there. At the Jasmine Show on YouTube. That's me and my wife's channel. We're going to start posting some more content, traveling, financial literacy. We want to do a whole bunch of things to continue this awesome platform that we have here. So thank you for this. And if anybody is interested in seeking out therapy, I could recommend BetterHelp, which is what I recommended to Grant. I have that. I've been using it for over a year now, and I think if you're interested, feel free to hit me up on Instagram at Vince Bracy. I can send you a link. Usually it's for one free week, and I also get a free week, but I always make sure anybody that asks me about therapy, I make sure they get both free weeks themselves. So go to therapy, y'all. Thanks, guys.
I appreciate you, Vince, and appreciate you, Grant, as well. Coming on here to be vulnerable. Final thoughts that I have, and I like to kind of wrap these talks up. Try to put it in a nice little bow. At the end of the day, if you are a male, because that's the space that we're talking to, but this also goes to women as well. If you have some type of struggle in your life. So that can look like, somebody trying to offer you help and you're defensive. If there's somebody that's trying to offer you suggestions or critiques on how you can do something better and you're defensive. If your partner and you argue every single day about little things, there's some miscommunication going on. You may want to go to therapy to iron out some of those differences because we are all different human beings, and just the dynamics of human beings is complex and sticky. But if we don't address the root cause of many of our issues that we are going through, we just end up getting into this cycle of repeated behaviors that never pan out or never become successful in the way that we want them to be. I encourage anybody who is listening to this episode or watching this episode to consider therapy. Consider figuring out why you have a bad relationship with your parents. You have a bad relationship with, maybe you have an ex partner and you have kids with that partner. Figure out why certain times a year you don't feel as happy as other times of the year. These are all triggers, these are all things that we all go through. We have to figure these things out. And as soon as you figure them out, I've heard it so many times, wow, I wish I would have done this years ago. Just think about the years that you can save on your life, not having to deal with the stress of whatever is going on in your life. So again, I appreciate you, Grant. I appreciate you, Vince, for coming on, having this conversation. I appreciate everybody who's listened, taking the time to listen and continues to listen and watch these episodes. If you know somebody that can value from this conversation that we're having, please share this video with them. I'm trying to spread this conversation to more people because there are men and women out there that can benefit greatly from therapy. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of push, or sometimes it just takes another voice explaining what therapy is. You can find me on all social media platforms, Kendrick Coates. We have more episodes coming after this. So be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel to be the first person to get notifications on these videos when they drop. Again, we appreciate you coming, watching, and listening. Until next time, we're out.